There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge, huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You've reached Johnny Has the Keys. We're a show that talks about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that often lift them above other films, but sometimes just separate them from films because of their uniqueness. Not always good. Sometimes that's not too bad. Sometimes I like a bad movie. David and I have been doing this. Well, I don't have enough time to tell you how long we've been doing this.
Mm-hmm.
However, we enjoy it, and we hope that you enjoy hearing our ponderings and speculations on these type things. We have been talking movies for a very long time, and if you're coming back, then you realize this, and you know what to expect. Those of you that are new to us, though, I just want to give a brief explanation. We're glad that you're here. We have other shows as far as movies, short type shows on YouTube, as well as stuff on Patreon. But this is our main show where we tackle a big subject for a longer amount of time. I mentioned David, my co-host. He is here with me right now. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing okay. I'm doing great. That was a great welcome for us. We normally start with what's happening in your genre week or what have you been doing? And I am on a continuation. I am continuing my delve into The Lost Fleet, a classic like science fiction series of novels that I'm listening to on audiobook. I think I mentioned it last week, but they're written by a guy named John Henry, who is a naval officer or was a naval officer until he decided he would retire. And now he's a writer. And that happened I think the first novel came out in 2006. I looked up the research. So this was a while ago. But it's literally like reading Heinlein again. It's that classic 40s, 50s sci-fi. And I just finished the 6th novel. And I thought, wow, I finished the whole series. This is great. And then did research and found out, oh, no, he has 2 more series after that.
Oh.
He continues the story after that. So he has 7 through 11. So again, another 5-book series. And then he's just working on, and this one, the last one came out in 23. So he's got another one that is a 4-part novel series. So evidently he had a lot of story to tell. And so far been good. I think I mentioned last week that you have to really like space combat. It's literally like reading a space combat simulator.
Yeah, you said that it was a lot of, and that it was very realistic
as
far as combat in space.
Very accurate, in how they do stuff. One of the biggest things they have are rocks. They actually throw rocks, and which they just gather from space, minor asteroids, small chunks of debris or whatever, and they form them into these ballistic things that then they just literally shoot at other ships because it'll knock huge holes in your ship, which is damaging in space. Not a good thing to have.
Yeah, so, I think we learned that a little bit in today's topic.
Yeah, a little bit in places, but yeah, that's all I've been doing was just continuing this whole Lost Fleet. I don't think I'm going to do the other series. So next week I'll probably talk about something else. But
that's a lot of reading.
But yeah, it's been a lot of listening on the commute. What about you? Doing anything scary?
Not really scary this time. I have been indulging in several documentaries, and one of the better ones, well, actually, there was more than one better one, but this is the one I'm going to talk about today. It's called Val Lewton, The Man in the Shadows.
Ooh.
This is a documentary for those of you out there that don't know who Val Lewton is. He is a legendary producer for RKO. He is best remembered for series of horror movies in the 40s that were created by RKO to compete with Universal, basically.
Mm-hmm.
This documentary is narrated by Martin Scorsese, who is clearly a fan. You and I have had this conversation before. Martin Scorsese is always talking about horror movies. Why has he never done one? Don't get
Well,
it.
the island one was his closest, right?
Shutter Island.
Shutter Island.
Was that
his
him?
closest.
Okay, yeah, that was creepy. But as much as this guy likes horror movies, I can't believe he's not doing more. It features commentary from Orson Welles, Val E. Lewton, who is Val Lewton's son. And the reason I say that is because Val Lewton was never caught on film or audio. There is none existing of him. And that is brought up by his, I guess, by his son. Roger Corman, Jacques Turner, who was a very good friend of his, and Robert Wise, who did movies for him as well. That's where Robert Wise, he was a little bit like Roger Corman in that respect. He did low budget horror movies and kicked off the careers of several people, including Robert Wise.
Okay.
Synopsis.
Wise was an editor at that time, right?
Yeah, he edited something that, he edited The Magnificent Ambersons, the Orson Welles film.
For Orson Welles, yep.
But one of his first movies was The Body Snatcher, which was a Boris Karloff, Val Lewton film.
Yeah.
Based on the Robert Louis Stevenson story. Anyway, short synopsis, if you need a synopsis for a documentary. Scorsese narrates this tribute to Val Lewton, the producer of a series of memorable low-budget films for RKO. Raised by his mother and his aunt, his films often included strong female characters who find themselves in difficult situations and have to grow up quickly. He's best remembered for the horror movies that began in 1942, starting with his first, Cat People, which we have covered on this podcast. He would meticulously oversee every aspect of the film's completion. Although categorized as horror films, his films never showed a monster, always leaving it to the viewer's imagination, assisted by music, mood, and lighting, which is his signature, basically. And we talked about that when we covered Cat People. I highly recommend this documentary. It got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I caught it on Turner Classic Movies. So, yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah. That's he is. I've always thought of Val Lewton as a director, but he really wasn't.
He's not.
He's the producer of all these, but he had such a firm hand in it, almost like, I want to say the closest might be like a Lucas over the Star Wars movies. The way he was the executive producer after the first one and had other directors direct it, but it was George's baby.
Right.
And I think that's the way Val was. He was a very studio-centric producer who was, this is what I want.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what his equivalent at Universal, who his equivalent at Universal would have been. Because I know Universal horror directors like James Whale, but I don't know who the producer was that put all that stuff together.
Interesting. I think that'd be cool to look up. Whale, of course, is who you immediately think of with Universal Monsters. That's just
right. And Lon Chaney, of course, who I also did a biography or documentary on.
Isn't it Jack Campbell? Isn't he the one who did Creature from the Black Lagoon? Isn't that him?
Are you talking about the makeup?
No, the directing. That wasn't Whale, was it?
No, that was Arnold.
Arnold, yeah, Jack Arnold. That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, not Jack Campbell.
And then Todd Browning would be the third that would come to mind. I just don't know who produced them. I know the directors. I don't know the producers. And there may have been multiple producers, but RKO specifically took Val Lewton and said, you are responsible in creating stuff to compete with Universal.
Yeah, right.
You know,
this is
and
your job right now.
He knew Jacques Turner from a prior relation. I can't remember what it was they had worked on. So he immediately said, I want Jacques, and pulled him in. Somehow Robert Wise got pulled into that mix and other directors. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's a good segue because we do know those directors, but we don't know either of the directors of the two movies we're doing today, I would bet.
No, I don't.
Because they are both...
They're South American, both of them, aren't they?
Correct. They're both South America, and they both have very few projects under their belt. And when I watched both of these again, I went, why did I put these together? they're
I
very
said the same thing.
they're very diverse in their storytelling and in their approach. The one thing that ties them together, of course, is both of them deal with extended space travel.
Right.
Both of them have to deal with a long-range mission that people have to deal with and have to deal with interpersonal struggles as well as the tolls of traveling through space that long, issues that could come up. But for those of you who don't know, go watch them right now and then come back. We are going to deal with two different films. We're going to start with the Europa Report, or actually, there's no "the," it's just Europa Report, which came out in 2013. And then we're going to do Stowaway, which was another science fiction film that came out in 2021. And we'll compare and contrast, but also talk about them individually, of course, the way we always do. I am taking it from your comment that you had not seen either of these before.
Nope.
Okay. And
And I
so let's talk.
watched one of them twice.
So let's talk about Europa Report, since it was the first one even in chronological order of these two, and fairly independent. Although, in my opinion, it doesn't look it. But I'm curious to see what you think of Europa Report, which was, just for credits, was directed by Sebastian Cordero. It's written by Philip Gillette. It stars probably a couple of people you might recognize, but you would never know. Sharlto Copley, Michael Nevquist, and Christian Camargo. But we'll talk about cast when you do into your cast thing. But I'm curious what you thought about it, because this is one of your least favorite genres of all.
Yeah, it's ironic. There's a lot of weird twist in my narrative here because this is probably my favorite of the two films, but there are things that really the whole found footage shit irritates me, and it's confusing at times. And to me, the reason it's my favorite is because it's scarier, obviously, than the other one is. But it's hard for me to get past found footage. It really is. So I watched it twice to make sure that I wasn't just being prejudiced against it being found footage. And I'm not. I did like it, but I don't know that I'd ever watch it again just because of the found footage thing.
Yeah, see, this is my third time watching it. I found it just on a recommendation somewhere where somebody said, blah, blah, blah. If you like this, maybe you'll like Europa Report. And I went, oh, okay. So, and loved it the first time I saw it. I really liked it this past two times. I would go on record as saying this is probably my favorite found footage film ever.
Okay.
Just because he structurally does it very, very well. You
But
never
when he
lose
cuts to a scene that's not that way, it's so much better. Like when he shows her at the end open up the hatch and you can see into the water and everything gets colorful and stuff, and it's not like found footage at all. It looks like cinema, and I don't know, it just looks so much better. And I was like, man, this movie would be so much better if it was like this.
Well, the two techniques he uses are found footage, meaning the cameras on the Europa space probe, the spaceship itself. Their cameras, because they do have a couple of handhelds that they carry around a couple of times, but he doesn't overuse that, which is, I think, is great. Helmet cameras, which is what they're seeing, and sometimes us seeing their faces, very Iron Man-y look.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess it came about because of Survivor, I think, but that confessional documentary thing where it's just somebody and they're obviously talking to the camera, talking about their story. And it's usually the head of the project who is she's relaying her story. But for those of you who don't know or haven't, go watch it now and then come back. But the basic story is we start with the head of this private space program that has reconnected with a lost ship after almost a year and a half. The entire movie is basically a flashback of the reports that we got from this Europa probe. But basically, this private space program venture a la SpaceX has tried to do a independent manned mission to Europa. About 6 months into the mission, they lose communications, and they really think the Europa mission has been destroyed or scrapped or lost in space forever. It's only when the actual astronauts land on Europa and can reconnect their communication system that they send everything back to Earth. And we are watching the compilation of all of that put together. That's what the movie is. The basic storyline is the 6 astronauts, the struggles they have to face en route. In other words, how did their communications get damaged? What happens then when they land on Europa? What are the struggles they have? And spoiler, they end up finding an alien life form living under the ice of Europa. And that's the ending. To Tim's point, that's the ending image, is this multi-tentacled, glowing, very James Cameron-y sort of
It
alien.
is very, yeah. I don't want to keep going back to it, but I just feel like this movie could have been so much more dramatic and suspenseful had it been done like a traditional movie and not with all the found footage. Although
See,
I
I just
realize
thought
that that's part of the plot. Obviously, it's the footage that's found or that's
Yeah.
sent back to Earth. It makes sense. I don't know. I'm just
See,
a
I thought
grumpy
it
old man.
really worked. And even his camera placement, setting where his cameras are, because they're locked down and they don't zoom in and zoom out and move around and all that. It's basically just one shot. And then we might cut to another. It's almost like we're watching a bunch of security cameras and we're
Right.
cutting in between them, which is, I thought, was really great. I also like the fact that he paced and directed this movie like a horror movie.
It's definitely got some horrific elements that I think could have been bolstered had it been shot like a traditional movie. Anyway,
Agreed.
yeah,
No, I understand. I don't agree because I really like it as a found
yeah.
footage. I think it works as opposed to Blair Witch or Haunted
Ugh.
House LLC or any of the other.
But there's some found footage that I can stomach. I stomached this twice actually, and I liked. We discovered last season. What's it called? Cloverfield.
Yeah.
And I like Wreck, the zombie one in the apartment building.
Rec would be my second after this, as far as
Yeah,
favorite found footage, just
yeah,
because he's very clever in where he puts what point of view he's using, if
yeah.
that makes sense.
But just found footages are never going to be my go-tos. I don't think there's ever going to be one that outdoes another one because they're all the same to me, kind of.
Yeah. Did you like the plot element of we're introduced in the very first scene almost, we're introduced to this guy who's sending a message home to his wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he's obviously our surrogate, the heart of the story. And then 15 minutes later, he's gone. And we don't know why for a good like 20 or 30 more minutes. We don't know what the hell happened to him and how he just is not there anymore. And they're
Well,
all
and
in
that
kind of
to
mourning.
me was also that was another reason why I was like, this is confusing. Why are they doing nonlinear and found footage? Because I guess the footage was jumbled that was sent back and in different order.
I did not get that impression. I got the impression that they essentially did it this way. It was a very directory to do it that way. But
Yeah,
I actually liked it. I did think it was a choice to get this character who's obviously the handsome guy. We like him. He's funny. He's playing pranks on people. He's obviously got a wife. He's very passionate, yada, yada. And then he's dead. And I
yeah,
thought, wow, that's interesting that, and he didn't even co-associate to like transfer our audience compassion to somebody else. Instead, he's just gone and we all have to react to it. And I was going, that was interesting. And then
yeah.
finding out how it happened and the fact that he essentially sacrificed himself for the other guy. And that makes sense why the other guy is so guilt-ridden and so upset and so solitary for most of the movie.
Yeah, if we're going to talk scenes like we normally
Yeah.
do, my favorite scene would probably be the scene where he dies, where Michael, or what's Michael name, Nivquist's name, Andre Andre Block
Hmm.
and him are outside trying to repair. Is it solar panels they're trying to repair? They're trying to repair something.
No, the communication.
Okay.
Because the communications have gone out, they think they can fix it by going out to the communications hub.
And somehow
And
he gets a very hazardous substance on his spacesuit, and Michael or the Andre character notices it when they're going back, and he's like, "You have to stay out." And at one point, he tries to rescue him and just going to have him strip out of his suit because apparently it's so toxic that if they bring it in, it'll just destroy everybody in the ship.
correct.
And I looked it up. That stuff is seriously toxic.
Yeah, it's fluorescein, I think. Is
Yeah, I was
yeah.
like, what is this stuff? And how did he get it on him?
Well, that's the one plot element I'll say, okay, I'd like an answer to, because why would it be out there near the communications hub? Why would you have rocket fuel near your communications hub?
So
That's
it's
just
part of,
weird.
it's like a rocket fuel ingredient. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
It is
funny because
highly
I have
toxic
more
to your
questions about the second film as far as logic.
Oh,
But
yeah. Well,
anyway.
once we go there, you're just going to throw physics out the window. I mean, that's
Okay, I
just
was
the way.
wondering because when I go into these movies, I know absolutely nothing about the science. So I'm totally relying on you to be an authority.
Yeah. But I liked scenes. Yes, I think that was a very good, that entire sequence was good
Yeah.
from
Oh, yeah.
them. But it also
Well, it's
is
like gravity. Whenever they're outside a spaceship, it's scary.
well, and it's also become this big trope too of anytime they go, it's true for The Expanse. If they go outside, something bad is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go outside. Just don't.
No.
2001 taught us that. Come on, don't go
Yeah.
outside. Something bad will happen. But I like that scene. I liked her. I ended up, my allegiance in the movie went from James, who I thought was cool, to the pilot, to the researcher, the girl, the Russian.
The marine biologist.
Yeah, the biologist, and then
Okay.
back to the pilot at the end. But
And
I
that's
really
Rosa.
liked
She's a girl too, right? Or is that Daniel Wu? William?
no, Rosa's the pilot. Rosa.
Yeah,
Daniel
Rosa's
Wu
the
is the
pilot.
captain.
Right. They're both more the flying people, and then you have the marine biologist that's there because they obviously have an ocean on the planet. And then
The
I
doctor.
think that Andre and the guy that dies are like engineers or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
Andre and James were both the engineers, mechanics.
They
and
each
all the
had a
other.
role that made sense.
Yep. I thought, but I liked her story and her being very intrigued by the possibilities, the fact that she did the EVA. Although, again, science plot hole number 2, you would not be able to fall, and this affects her and the end of the movie. You would not be able to fall through the ice. Even where they were, which was short of their hot zone or whatever, when they put their little drill in, remember it took it like hours and hours and hours to drill down because the ice on Europa is miles thick.
Oh yeah, it would be very, very thick, I would think.
It shows a little graphic of her and the surface line is here and she's going, boop. No, you would not be falling. You would just be stuck in the ice because it's miles thick.
Well, and is there gravity on that planet? On that
There
moon?
is, but they didn't really do it totally realistically. I think it's only 1/8 of Earth.
So
it'd be even
that would have enhanced, or that would have prevented the sinking as well, I would think. Some.
yeah, you would be much lighter. So they threw those two science things out of the way and said, once we get here, we're going to have a monster in the lake story
Yeah.
with the bioluminescence. But I like the bioluminescence. I like the way he filmed it all.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a really cool sequence, the way she died. I also really liked the last sequence in this movie where we're building up in pace and we're seeing the final segments of it. And she knows that there's no hope. So she opens the hatch to let
Mhm.
the creature in, just to have some recorded proof.
Mm.
So I thought all of that was really great. Also, almost any scene that Andre is in, he's such a great actor.
I love him. He's my favorite thing about this whole thing.
Yeah, he was really, Daniel Kim was okay. He normally is, but
You mean Daniel Wu?
Daniel Wu, sorry, was good, but I really liked Andre's character and the way he played Andre. all the way
Yeah,
through.
I hate that he died.
Mhm.
Not in the movie, but in real life. He's no longer with us. He's one of the big baddies in John Wick, too.
Well, I remember him from Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, that whole series. He's in all
Hmm.
3 of the movies.
Yeah, he's a
So
Swedish actor.
the
That's another thing I
originals.
like about this cast is it's very diverse. Like everyone is from a
Yep.
different country. Any other scenes?
I don't
The
think
scene you just mentioned where she opens up the hatch at the end to me stands out as much as the one where the guy dies out in
yeah.
space. And of course, everybody dies.
Tatia's EVA I like a lot too. Her going out and getting the samples and seeing the bioluminescence
That
and
was
then all that.
suspenseful because it's
Yeah,
like you're outside the ship again, man. You don't go outside the ship.
right. No, come back in. Come back in. Click.
There's some
Uh,
light over there. I'm going to go check it out.
yep.
Okay. You can
Uh-huh.
tell the people inside are like, I don't know. Yeah.
Their wire work was great. Their weightlessness was great. I love the design elements in this show,
Hmm.
in this movie. I really
Hmm.
like the way they designed the ship,
You know where it
structure,
was
everything.
filmed?
No.
Brooklyn.
Well, there you go.
I think that's
Perfect.
hilarious. I guess there's some really good soundstage in Brooklyn.
There must be with some good work in it. Yeah, we were segueing into cast. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about cast?
I don't really have a lot on them because they're mostly people that I've never seen before. Rosa, the captain or pilot
Pilot.
that you were talking about, is played by Anna Maria Marinka. She is
Hmm.
Romanian. You mentioned Michael Nivquist played Andre. He is Swedish. I knew him from John Wick. You knew him from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Obviously, he's
Yeah,
Swedish. That's one of the reasons why he was in that. Carolina Widra played Katya. She is Polish. I think she's the marine biologist.
she is. Hmm.
I don't have pictures with these now because IMDb has screwed up their casting. I have to go to a different website to get the cast now, and it doesn't have pictures. So I'm piecing it together. Daniel Wu played William Zhu,
Well,
and I
Caroline
was,
Wadra or
yeah.
Wydra, whatever, who played Katya.
Mhm.
I know you're watching Agents of Shield. She will appear in Agents of Shield in like
Oh, okay.
eight or 9 episodes. She also was at least for half a season or an entire season on True Blood. So
It
great.
has been a very long time since I watched True Blood, but I did see most of it. I don't think I saw
Yeah.
the last season. Daniel Wu, I recognize, especially in that picture behind me. And then I realized he was on Westworld, and I watched the first season of that. So I
Hmm.
assume that's where you know him from, maybe as
Yeah, he
well.
was Jay in Westworld. Yep.
Yeah. And his character's name is William Zhu, XU. So it's
Yeah.
confusing. It's Daniel Wu playing William Zhu, 2-letter last names.
He's got a lot of credits on
Mm-hmm.
IMDb. If you watch him, he's done a lot of character work.
I think most of these guys do. It's just
Hmm.
stuff I'm unfamiliar with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Charlton Copley was
Hmm.
James Corrigan, the guy that floats out into space and dies. He played Daniel Luxembourg. No, excuse me. He played James Corrigan, and he is South African. So we saw him a long time ago in that movie District 9, which is a
Yeah.
South African movie, a science
He
fiction movie.
also plays the title character in Chappie. He's the robot in Chappie. He's the voice and the actor of it.
Okay. I mentioned Daniel
And
Luxembourg by mistake because it's a line down. That guy was played by Christian Camargo. Yeah, Camargo.
mhm.
And I recognize from The Hurt Locker, which is a movie I saw back when it was like a nominated for Oscars. It's been a few years.
Okay.
M. Beth Davids was familiar to me too. She is the one that's back on Earth that starts this film, Dr.
Hmm.
Samantha Unger.
Yes.
She was in Schindler's List and she was in Matilda. So she's done larger movies than some of these folks.
Yes. She's also done, I had in my notes, she was in Californication. She's done like 10 episodes of that
I
series with
watched that
David
show, but
Duchovny.
I don't remember it very well.
Mad Men
That too.
and Ray Donovan, the other series. I've never seen that Ray Donovan
I've
series,
not
but
seen Ray Donovan, but I like Liv Schreiber or Liv Schreiber.
yeah.
Now, one of the other people back on Earth that is assisting with this mission is Dan Folger playing Dr. Nikita Solikov. as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh my God, that's Luke from The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
You would love his character on The Walking Dead because he's a theater guy. That
Okay.
he has like a traveling theatrical troupe in the apocalypse.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I think you would like him. And then
I
there's
knew him from Fantastic Beasts. He's in all three of the Fantastic Beasts
okay.
movies.
Well, he's great in The Walking Dead, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he lives. He's in the final few seasons, and I think he lives.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
Isaiah Whitlock played Dr. Tarek Pamuk, and then of course Neil deGrasse Tyson was himself in like archival footage.
Yeah.
That's really all I have on the cast. I don't have a lot of other juicy tidbits.
Well, I do really commend this movie for using science, as much realistic science as they could, and the overall plot thing. Scientists have theorized, since we found ice on Europa, scientists have theorized there might be life there. It
See,
might
I
be the
always heard that
only
about
other.
Titan, not Europa.
Titan is volcanic, though. It's like Io.
No,
Both of them
Titan is
are.
frozen.
I'm pretty sure. Well,
I
yeah,
studied astronomy for a brief period. I was going to major in it, and
right.
and I was always told that if there was any other life in this solar system, it was likely on Titan
Hmm.
underneath ice. Now,
Same thing with
Io is
Europa. Europa's the
volcanic,
same deal. Yeah. Io
and
is the volcanic one. Yeah,
and I
Europa.
think Europa was just like Mars, except it's a moon. It's just a rock, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there is water on it. I don't know.
Well, they theorize there is, and they've done a couple of other probes there. They did get some things wrong. The gravity, of course, is wrong on Europa. The ice is miles thick. I don't think you would ever have a communication system without a backup. So you would have some way to back up the communications, and also the same thing with just in general. Just because they lost communication with the spacecraft doesn't mean that NASA or the private company on Earth isn't monitoring that spacecraft. And they would definitely see them slow down and go into orbit and land on the planet. So you wouldn't think that they were gone. And they didn't explain that ever. It might have been interesting to have just another little interview with her saying, we could, of course, tell that they had landed on the surface, but we still had no communication with them, or something like that would have helped with that. One sentence would have solved that whole thing. But yeah, they would have definitely monitored that ship somehow.
Mhm.
So,
I do think, well, first of all, let me go on to awards because I forgot that. The Sickest Catalonian International Film Festival nominated this for Best Motion Picture. We've mentioned them a few times because they do genre pictures. The Sci-Fi and Fantasy Writers of America nominated it for a Bradbury Award, I guess for screenplay maybe. And then it is not on the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die list. That being said, I love the story. I think the story is a great idea for this.
yes,
That's why I
I do too.
really wish it was a theatrical movie and not a found footage movie, because to me, the story is great.
Yep. I agree. I think the plot's good. I like the
Mm-hmm.
direction personally. I do like all the performances.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a solid movie in my opinion. It's a good science fiction movie.
Yeah, yeah. I could see where you would think it is for sure.
There is another one that came about around the same time. I think it came out in the same year, as a matter of fact, or within a year of it, called Apollo 18. It's another found footage that tries and does it terribly. It is horrible and not well done. And it's basically about the mission to the moon that nobody knew about. The last mission to the moon on Apollo 18 that nobody knows about, and how it ended so tragically.
Is it
Yeah.
fictionalized?
Oh, God, yeah.
There was no last mission to the moon, was there,
No,
that I
there
know
was no
of?
Apollo
Yeah, I don't
18.
think
No,
so.
this was the supposedly the one that nobody knew about. We kept it buried for years, and that's why
Okay.
we found the footage and we're talking about it. And
Right.
it's terrible. But I would mention it as a key just because it's very similar in space, found footage, survival, everybody dies kind of movie. Key.
Okay. Did you have any other stuff you wanted to talk about before we did Keys?
Not really. I think it was really cool that you found out the production was in Brooklyn. That's cool.
Yeah. He's from Ecuador, I think. He's from South America.
Yeah.
And I guess he's living in America. I don't know. And because this movie was filmed in Brooklyn. To have such an international cast, I guess it makes sense that it was in New York for it to be such an international cast. New York's a pretty big city for America where people would gather. So maybe
Yeah.
that makes sense. It would either be there or LA, I guess. But I don't have any other trivia. I have a few keys.
Yeah. Go ahead with a key. I've got
Well,
two.
you mentioned James Cameron, and a lot of this is like the abyss because of those creatures underwater that glow.
Yep.
It's very much like the abyss. But I
I mean,
also,
if you were watching like that last little video sequence without
Mhm.
the astronaut stuff, you could easily say, "Oh, that's a clip from the abyss."
Mhm.
Yeah, easily.
Of course, my mind went elsewhere. It went to Lovecraft because it looks like a Lovecraftian monster with all those tentacles too.
Yes. Yeah. And the weird, just the weird luminescence of it and everything.
It's
Yeah,
like an
I could
eye
definitely.
and a bunch of tentacles coming out or something.
Yep, I could definitely say that. I think the biggest key to this is 2010,
Mm.
both in the novel and in the movie. They mention Europa. As a matter of fact, the alien intelligence says stay away from Europa. I think the the broadcast back to Earth once Jupiter becomes a sun is all of these planets are now yours except Europa. Make no contact there.
Mhm.
And you go, ooh, okay, cool. I wonder why. And it's because in the movie, at the very end, you see that the monolith is there on a primordial Europa, ready to
Right.
start it all over again. But that I think is the biggest key to this one is 2010.
Yeah, I've got from IMDb. It says in the Odyssey, in the book, it includes a Chinese spacecraft landing on Europa with similar results as this
Mm-hmm.
movie, but
Mm-hmm.
that the movie adaptation excluded that. So you do find out a little more in the Arthur C. Clarke book than you do in the book movie, but both are 2010, the story.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
story.
Mhm.
There's, of course, homage to 2001 when they first become weightless. They play the Blue Danube.
Oh, yeah, that's
So it's
right.
immediately you think of 2001. That song is now. I don't know how anybody could ever do a ballet or play that song without somebody visualizing 2001.
hmm
It just is what it is. What else? You got anything else?
I just Greek mythology in general, because
Mhm.
Europa is a woman who was abducted by Zeus, Jupiter in Roman mythology, but Greek mythology
Yep.
it was Zeus. So she's
Um,
from the name itself is from Greek mythology.
I've got two that are similar in thematic. One is called Life, that came out a few years ago.
Is that the one with
Um,
the Y, Lyfe?
no, it's LIFE, but it's set on space station orbiting Earth, and an alien life form starts to kill
I've
everybody.
seen it. It's got Ryan Reynolds in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. He is in it as a frightened character. I
I
think our
seem to
new
remember
alien.
liking it. I think Jake Gyllenhaal's in it too.
It was pretty good. It wasn't great, but it was pretty good. And then the other one is Moon,
hmm
which
I haven't seen it. I know what you're talking about though.
the
Sam,
the
what's his
big
name?
yeah, the similarity in it is this whole desperation of your mission is failing. What do you do? Do you keep going, or do you give up, or what do you do? And then how do you do it? It's actually more similar to The Martian than it is to this, but there are these allusions to space travel and being in a hostile environment, and what do you do, and having to do EVAs all the time. It gets suspenseful. Don't go outside. Don't go outside.
Well, and the Martian is a key because of the fact that they're marooned too.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
maroon there. Yeah. So those are the biggest ones.
And then I have one I lifted from IMDb, a movie called Monsters. Have you heard of this?
Monsters?
Yeah, from 2010.
Nope.
It says at the end there appears an alien squid similar to the one in Monsters. And
Oh,
in Monsters, the beginning credits mention a crash probe from Europa.
oh wow. Okay.
So I've never seen that movie. I'm not sure.
I've
I
never
think it's a
heard
kid
of it.
movie. Isn't it a kid movie?
I don't know. It
I
might
don't
be.
know either. Hmm.
Mom, my pet squid is here. Yeah.
All the way from Europa.
Yeah, all the way from Europa.
But yeah, that's all I had
I
was
think a
that
good
last one.
segue to our second festive discussion today would be don't go outside. because
The spaceship.
definitely, yeah, it definitely plays a role in Stowaway from 1921. Sorry, 2020. It was directed by Joe
It's a silent
Pena.
film.
Yeah, it was written by Joe Pena and Ryan Morrison. Has an all-star cast, which Tim will get into when we get into it. You had not seen this one before either, right?
I had not at all. Mm-mm.
And thoughts on Stowaway?
Well, I like it better visually, for obvious reasons, because it is
Obviously,
not
yeah,
found footage.
correct.
I like it because it's a small story. There's only 4 characters in the entire film. I don't like it because I feel like the science is really fucked up, even though I don't know for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, I love Toni Collette in just about anything because I think she is a phenomenal actress. I liked the first film better because it was scarier. I like this film better for its visuals.
Okay.
That's the easiest way I can sum it up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good summation, so to speak. I did not like this movie. This is the second time I've watched it, and I was hoping that I would like it better, and did not.
The whole time I was watching it, I was saying what you said. What do these movies have in relation with each other? And then I was like, oh, this must be our sister episode to that episode we did with Metropolis and I Am Mother. Remember when we did those and they had nothing to do with each other?
There was no reason to put those two together. Yeah.
I was like, what is going on in his head?
Yeah. I think there were huge. I agree with you in that I think this movie looks great. The production design is great. The special effects are really strong. It's really good. But you cannot do a science fiction movie that the science is so wrong. And I think this director is basically terrible because he co-wrote it. So I think he's not very good. And to make the plot decisions he made, I thought were really weird. The biggest one being anytime there's communication back to Earth, we only hear one side of the conversation. Why is that? That made no sense to me. The first time I thought, oh, he's just trying to hint that there's a delay, maybe, but there's not because they're having a conversation. So, okay, there's no delay. Fine. But then every time anybody talks to Earth, you can't hear what they're saying. And especially in the scene where he's talking to his sister to say goodbye, one of the most iconic scenes from this original story from the 30s, and you don't hear her side of it. I went, what? You just don't know drama at all or how to tell a story.
What do you mean from the 30s?
The original, the biggest key to this is cold equations. I'm sorry, 50s, 54. That's the biggest key to this.
I didn't realize that. Oh, actually, no, I do have that from IMDb. Okay, I see.
This is a modern adaptation of Cold Equations, Tom Goodwin's so iconic science fiction short story. It appeared in Astounding Magazine in 1954. Okay. Blah, 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 blah.
That's really cool. I just don't know that much about sci-fi. So you knew about it. Okay. Gotcha.
Well, and I know about it, but we'll get to that when we get to keys.
I know more about the director, though, that explains some of your disliking.
Oh, please let me know that.
He is not really a movie director. He is a very prolific commercial director that does high-end, expensive commercials. So he makes a lot of money doing commercials and music videos. So this was probably one of his few films, if his only, maybe. So that's why I find it visually appealing, but it's also why there's a lot of problems with it because he's used to doing short things to sell things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the issue right there.
Well, that makes sense because his pacing is so erratic too, overall in pacing the movie. So that makes sense. He's into this little moment about it and that looks cool, but then we're on to something else that slows the entire plot down to a crawl before we do anything. And just all the science stuff. Immediately when you have a stowaway on board, wouldn't you turn around? Oh no, we're too far gone. We don't have enough fuel. Really? You just started. You've
And
only
can
been
you,
gone like a day.
you didn't do a synopsis, but can you explain that? I don't understand how that happened.
Well, the biggest thing is I don't understand how that happened because
Oh, okay.
all right, we
It's like,
show the
was he
launch.
working on the ship, fell asleep, and it took off with him in there? What happened?
Okay, so yeah, I think that's the premise that they originally might have had in the script is that he was a technician working on the ship, but obviously back on Earth, we don't have any presets to make sure, hey, everybody's off the vehicle before we
Right.
launch it. Is the weight the same as we had it last hour ago or 2 minutes ago, or for the launch that we speculated and programmed? And it's not just that he got knocked out or fell asleep or had a seizure and woke up. It's that the captain is walking along her ship after they've already launched, sees a spot of blood on the floor, has to take a tool and unscrew a panel in the ceiling, and he falls out of it. How did he get in the freaking panel?
Right.
And who screwed it back in? And who put him up there? None of it is explained.
I went back and watched those scenes over and over again, looking. I was like, am I missing something? Did they say something later,
No.
like after the fact that, oh, this is how it happened? I could not find anything.
There is nothing. It makes no freaking sense. Why is he in the ceiling of all things? I could have bought, oh, we just happened to have somebody that didn't report back in before the launch was cleared and the weight limits are somehow off for no reason that we don't understand.
Or there was some
And
chemical that knocked him out that was very
correct.
lethal. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking for, and I never saw it.
Yeah, no, no. But no, we had to screw him into the ceiling of all things. I'm going, how the,
He's in the air ducts,
yeah.
basically like Alien.
Uh,
No, I don't know. It's weird. It's very strange. And then he falls on her, which I understand is traumatic, but I don't think that she would have been pinned that badly.
no,
She's like, get him off me, and he's just on her arm. Why can't she just pull her arm out?
right. And it broke her arm for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it was
Her
weird.
arm's in a cast.
Maybe it broke, and that's why she can't pull it out. But I don't know. It just seemed odd to me. The whole
And then
thing
we
seemed
have,
odd.
again, pacing. Then we have scene after scene after scene. I think there's 4 scenes after that where the Anna Kendrick character is seeing to him and doctoring him up, and this is happening. And then we finally talk about consumables. Oh, wait, we only have enough oxygen for us, and now we've got another person. We don't have enough food for us, and now we've got another person. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, why didn't you think of that like day one while you're being stitched up with your cast? You'd be going, we got to do something because he can't be here. But they don't talk about consumables at all. Where did he get clothes from? Is he wearing Daniel's clothes, the other guy's clothes? Where did those come from? Because he has 3 or 4 outfits he wears in the film.
Right.
If you have, and the other ones in my notes, if you have enough fuel to get to Mars, you have enough fuel to turn around within the first few weeks of the trip. You have plenty of fuel to turn around and come back.
But you need a
So
moon to ricochet around.
no, no, that would send you back in time before he was put in the ceiling.
Oh,
So yeah, there so much science is wrong with this. There are no backup contingencies for anything. They have no extra air. They have no extra food. They have no extra fuel. They have no extra water. So no, you would never plan a mission this way.
Also, well, okay, here we go with the questions. We're not even doing scenes yet. But like, why is the capsule, I guess, that blasts them off tethered to it by this long cable? Why is that? What is with that design?
Because we have to have that to have the last act suspense climb the rope sequence that is all dangerous, which makes no sense. There is no
I just
tension
don't
to it.
understand the design of having the main ship down here, a midway point, and then the capsule that helped propel them up top 500 feet or whatever it is. I was like, wouldn't that not be aerodynamic? It just seems weird to me.
Well, there's no aerodynamics in space. You
I
don't have to be
know, but
aerodynamic.
still, even some spaceship or space stations look weird to me when I see them in space. But this is really weird to me.
Yeah, this whole tether slingshotty
Where
design, I
there's
didn't.
some gravity, but not always. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Wait, there's no gravity in space.
it's explained in the Europa one that you only get gravity from centrifugal force. So that's the only time you would ever have gravity. Because you notice in Europa, they would climb up the ladder and go all the way up to the upper section because it's spinning. And when they're in that upper section, they had gravity. But when they came down, they didn't in their chambers and in their quarters. So the weirdness is, and I'm sorry, I said that the opposite. When they go to the command module, they don't have gravity. They float around up there. But when they're in their quarters, they do.
Yeah, I trusted it more than I trusted this film as far as logic.
Oh yeah, logic and science don't work in this film at all.
And like sometimes they were lighter, sometimes they were not. I was like, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe it's because the thing was spinning. I don't know. I don't know. I don't care.
Well, when plot points become contrivances and you look at it and go, the only reason this is here is because we have to have this last act where they have to learn to do the tether. And even then you don't hold to your own premise because they're not tethered to anything.
I was like, that was insane. I was like,
which
you
is
don't have you
insane.
not seen Sandra Bullock in Gravity?
Yeah.
You,
When you jump out by yourself, you're tethered.
right. And they're
know?
just like scooting up them pipes like monkeys.
Yeah.
I was like, no, you don't do that.
Right. And then you have to turn around and just slide to the other end because of the gravity, which is not there. The gravity is not there. It's on the outside.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen to her the second time. I guess she was more prepared. I don't know. But it's like, I can't stop. I'm going too fast.
Right.
And
That's
she
because we
drops.
had to lose the canister.
Right, right.
Which
it seemed
drops
contrived.
which drops down. Nothing would drop. There's no down in space. It's out. If you open something, it goes away from you. It doesn't go down like you're on. I kept thinking in that whole last scene, I kept thinking, I haven't seen the movie yet, but there's some movie that came out a couple of years ago, and it's the two girls, and they're up on the really, really, really tall tower. They get attacked by a buzzard or whatever, or the rung falls off and they can't get down. I can't remember the name of it, but I've seen the trailer like 3 or 4 times. But
I don't even know what you're talking about.
they climb this like tiny, tiny freaking tower, and they're at the very top of it. And
This is a
that's what,
movie?
yeah, yeah, I'll look it up for you. But anyway, but there's, I kept thinking that was what this scene was from, because you drop something and it goes whoo for miles dropping down and everything else. I'm going, that doesn't happen in space. It floats away from you, goes away, not down. And other stuff too. There's just no, we can't get in. I got more invested in James and his little talking to his wife and kids and the like 7 minutes of screen time he had than anybody in this movie, including Anna Kendrick.
Anna Kendrick's my least favorite person in this movie.
Yeah, she's
and
annoying.
Toni Collette is wasted, basically.
Totally.
The two
Completely
guys
wasted.
are the best thing in this movie.
Yes, as far as that goes, but I think they still make just stupid decisions and plot elements.
And there's a lot of really contrived stuff, like you said, as far as her dropping the canister, as far as the plants dying. It's like every time you think something might be good, more plants died. We're running out of air.
Mm-hmm.
There's one scene where he just pulls out one and you see a whole nother thing of algae has died or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if it's that sensitive, then how do you expect to get there and it do well there? I can talk about cast real quick if you want. Anna Kendrick plays Zoe Levinson. She's the ship's doctor. We know her from the George Clooney movie Up in the Air, as well as the Pitch Perfect movies, which I have not seen.
I have.
I'm not a fan. I don't really. She doesn't have.
She was also Catwoman.
In what?
One of the Batmans.
Yeah, I don't know. she does not have the it factor for me. Something about her just, I'm like, oh well, it's her, whatever.
I think she's competent. I don't like this character at all.
Maybe that's it. Maybe this is the only thing I've seen her in. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was not impressed. Toni Collette, I am very impressed with, but not in this movie because she is basically overtrained for this movie. She plays Marina Barnett, the ship's commander. She is Australian. I first saw her in Muriel's Wedding ages ago. She has also been in The Sixth Sense, Little Miss Sunshine, The Hours, Hereditary. We covered it a few years back on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Love her. Daniel Day Kim is someone I know but haven't seen a lot of. He was on Lost and didn't speak English, and he was great on that show. He is the ship's biologist whose algae keeps dying. I think he is one of the better characters in this. And Shamir Anderson, who is the least accomplished of the three of them, to me is the best thing in this movie.
Yeah.
He plays Michael Adams, the stowaway, the launch support engineer, and eponymous stowaway is how they categorize him. I don't know him from anything, and I think he's fantastic.
He is.
So,
and
the scene that sticks out to me is the scene where David Kim tells him, "You can't stay," and gives him the suicide pen.
Oh, gives him the injector.
That's the one scene that stands out to me the most in this. That, and maybe when he's saying goodbye to his sister.
Well, that's the closest to the moral dilemma that's in this.
Yeah, and that's probably why I like it.
And it's also part of the could have been of it and the flawness of it. The original story, for those of you who haven't read it, go read Tom Goodwin's story. It's really good. But basically, we're on a very, 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 very small ship, and it's almost like an EVA shuttle. And the guy launches because he is carrying these valuable vaccination drugs that are needed on this one planet. The ship that's coming closest to it asks for volunteers, gets this guy to volunteer to do it because it's a one-way mission. They can't come back and rescue him. He's going to be on this planet for at least a few years. So he agrees to do it because there's a plague on this planet. They need the vaccine to help them. And this is the closest ship that could possibly make it in time before the entire colony dies. So he goes, okay, I'll do it. Within like hours of being dropped off, and he is dropped off, meaning they jump out of light speed, they shoot him, and they take off again. So he's alone. Within a few hours of that, he realizes that his instruments aren't functioning right and something's weird, and he's drifting off course, and he shouldn't be, and things aren't tabulating. He finds a stowaway on board, this young girl who's like 15, and she's stowed away because her brother is on that colony and she wants to go visit him. And she doesn't understand any of the rules or physics or anything. And he basically has to tell her, okay, my fuel was gauged for these vaccines, me and the ship. That's it. You being on here has thrown us all off. And if you stay on here longer than this amount of time, I won't make it to that planet. And everybody on that planet will die. And that's the dilemma. The moral dilemma is she has to make the decision to kill herself and get her weight off the ship. But they try everything. They take parts of the ship apart, chairs, all this, jettison them, get rid of it, see what we can do to at least extend our fuel. But in the end, he realizes no. And she's the one that has to call her brother and say goodbye to him. And it's so emotional and so painful and so awful. And then she goes into the airlock and says, go ahead, blah, blah, blah. And none of that is in this. And they should have realized that from the very beginning. There's like 3 different scenes where Colette's character says, no, you can't do that. It's too risky. I don't want to do it. Don't you understand? Unless somebody does, all of you die. Doesn't matter. So yeah, do everything you can. Don't say I can't risk one person. Yeah, you can, because if you don't, nobody lives. You cannot live without the consumables that are there. And they don't have that moral dilemma in this story at all. And the premise is just so flawed from the very beginning. The title, He is not a stowaway. He's an accidental passenger, but he's not a stowaway.
He's
He
not.
didn't
He
do
didn't
it.
do it deliberately. Yeah.
Correct. So even the title is wrong to me. Other stuff too, just the science doesn't work. We go all the way up here to get oxygen canisters, which are used in the fuel. That makes sense. Or used in the engines. That makes sense. But one canister is going to be 3 months of air.
I
Why
didn't
don't you have-
understand that either. I'm like, you're slapping that thing in, and that's going to be, yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
a month of air or something.
Why
That's
not
crazy.
have like 10 of those in the compartment you got back here?
Right.
Rather than, it just, I was so pissed off about parts of
Is
this
it like
movie.
condensed?
Yeah.
I don't know. This
Highly
movie
compressed air.
did not win any awards. It is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die. Of course, that list is only updated through 2020. This came out in 2021. I have a feeling, and I don't know, this is more like a gut thing, but I have a feeling one of the reasons this is bad is it's just Netflix had some money and said, hey, do this, and shoved it at a commercial director or whatever. Because it is a Netflix only movie. You can't find this movie anywhere else.
And I did read that the production process was really stressful, skewed, whatever. Like the original script, the consumable they were losing was water. They didn't have enough water for that many people, not air. And so they just changed the whole script and said, no, let's make it air instead, and had to rewrite all this stuff and put all these scenes in. And it's just like, okay, and I've got in my notes, Zoe should have started as the least likely person to sacrifice herself. She should have been a total bitch. That would have at least made me a little bit more invested in the story. Because, like I said, in the original story, the stowaway has to sacrifice themselves. That's the irony of the moral dilemma. In this, he doesn't. She does. She sacrifices herself and just has a sit down out there during the solar flare.
And I don't understand that logic either. Is there always like radiation storms floating through space or whatever?
No, there are bursts like that usually come from what they call coronal mass ejections, which are like solar flares. A lot of people call them solar flares, that type of thing. But the sun is a long way away. We know when that's coming. And it won't be within a few minutes or a few hours. It'll be days later that we
and
know
there's
that
like green dust.
Yeah.
That's
No, that
getting
was their
on their
way of
uniforms.
showing,
I'm like, what is this?
Of showing the mass ejection. Yeah, I was like, no. That's
And I'm like,
not
it's
how that
radiation
works.
just floating through space. If you did have a solar flare, I would think that far away, you would just maybe feel a slight rise in temperature or something. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't dissipate with range. It just, because there is no atmosphere to buffer it. There is no other thing. The only thing that can happen is gravitational can pull the wave apart, the energy, the mass ejection. But the fact that, well, just don't do an EVA right now. Let's wait about 15 minutes. And when it goes past, then you can go outside.
Yeah.
And if you think your EVA is going to take you 3 hours, don't do it during that window of this it wouldn't happen. It just, there was so many times in this movie I wanted to do that commercial where it goes, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So I was frustrated.
No, yeah, I can understand why. Did you have any keys or trivia or whatever?
The only trivia I had was the one I mentioned, that the original script had water as the missing element that they needed to get, and they were out of. But
the only I have is the same one you said about the cold equations.
Mm-hmm.
And I lifted it from IMDb because apparently it has been adapted several times, including a Twilight Zone episode from 1985, the Twilight Zone reboot. There was apparently a short film in 96 called The Cold Equation, one called The Cold Equations in 2011, and then this one. So there have been adaptations. I don't know if any of them are any good or not.
They are. The Twilight Zone one is pretty good, but it's got some horrible like special effects because it's a bad spaceship
the 80s
design.
Yeah.
But the story is pretty good. The 86, the 96 version is Bill Campbell is the lead in it, and he's good in it.
I like Bill.
The 2011 version I haven't seen, There was also a radio drama in 55, right? The year after it came out, they turned it into a radio drama for X-1, which was a science fiction radio show. And I did a version of it during COVID. We did a version of it at the Guild and broadcasted. It was one of
cool.
our at-home series of Zoom theater pieces, and we did it. And if you YouTube and look at it, I found a very bizarre theater version of it where people had done it as a short one act in theater on stage, and they filmed it, and it was pretty theater based, but it was again this huge moral dilemma story of based on the title, Cold Equations. There is no give or take in space, and you have to make hard decisions. I have again, like we said, anytime you have a space movie or a science fiction movie in space and you go outside, an accident will happen. And I've got Gravity, Interstellar, The Expanse, For All Mankind, 2001, all of those. When people go outside the ship, bad things happen. So all of those are direct keys to this.
No, I agree. Gravity's always going to be my go-to because that to me is the most suspenseful out of ship sequence because it goes on for so long.
But it's so good the way he tailors and paces that movie. We have this hope, and then it's dashed, and then but wait, there's another thing we could do. Oh no, and it just keeps going, and it's so good.
Right.
You at the end of that movie, you go, oh yes, okay, good. The same way she is crawling on the beach,
and then George Clooney's ghost turns up.
Yeah, sitting on a rock over there going, I told you so.
Yeah.
You know. But this movie doesn't have that. The emotional content isn't there. I don't think the plotting is there, and the science is definitely not there. So it doesn't work for me in any of those realms.
No. Like I said, it's visually appealing. The story is not. And then to me, the Europa Report's almost the exact opposite. It's not visually appealing, but the story's great. So that's how I would sum it up.
That's why I did it, Tim. I put these two together so you would have to say that the found footage movie was at least better than this one.
That's it. You were out to get me. You were out to befuddle me. Or you were giving me two movies so that I would at least like half of one.
Half of one some way. Yeah. There you go.
But no, I think the horror of Europa Report is what appeals to me more than anything because it is almost a monster movie.
Yeah.
So there's some really good, and then the whole death sequence of the guy in space is great. And all of that stuff's very unsettling and chilling. So
it's paced, and like I said, it's paced and written to me like a horror movie. We have this character, suddenly they're gone, and we're seeing the effects of all these other characters, and they're tense, and they're upset, and they're guilt-ridden, and something's up, and we don't know what it is. And we finally figure out it's really a horrific, bad thing, and then more horror comes after that.
And especially Michael Nyqvist, who is like totally just zoned out. And it's like, what is going on? They're like, have you slept? He's like, no, I don't sleep.
Yeah, he's so guilt-ridden.
Like, wow.
He's so blaming himself the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. It's Science Fiction Week here at Johnny Has the Keys, and we had 1 out of 2.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It is my turn to do this. I forgot. I'm totally out of it. That is what David and I think of these two movies. What do you think? We would like to know. Let us know in the comments down below, or if you're listening on the podcast airwaves, you can always jump over to our website or leave a little star rating or comment on whatever platform you like to use to listen to us. And until next time, which I do believe we will be in Horrorland again. And it's not only Horrorland, it's A24 land as well.
Uber horror.
Which means it could be a slow burn, but it could be really good. Or it might be pretentious, or it might not be. We will have to see.
We will.
It is a horror movie. And David, I enjoy this as always. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yep. See you then.
All righty. Bye.
start the car, Johnny has the keys.